Welcome to GardenDC, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine, and we're aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. This week on the GardenDC Podcast, I'm joined by Louise Clarke, horticulturalist with the Morris Arboretum outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Louise.
Well, thanks, Kathy. How are you today?
Great, and you?
I am fine. I was just up on my green roof today.
Well, I hope you weren't too blown away. We're having some major windstorms coming through this week in the Mid-Atlantic.
Yes, it was windy here too, but I had my safety harness on.
Okay, so we're going to talk to Louise all about green roofs and walls and precautions and safety harnesses and most importantly, what plants we can grow up on these surfaces. But first, Louise, let's talk a little bit about you. So how did you get up onto that roof? How did you get this job at the Morris Arboretum?
Well, that's kind of a long story, but we'll shorten that a bit. I was a career changer. So I was formerly a clinical laboratory scientist, toiling away behind a microscope for 20 years, diagnosing cancer or pre-malignant cells. And I finally decided I need to get away from that microscope. I needed to get outdoors. And I always loved plants and had a garden and decided, I think I'm going to try this as a career change. So indeed I did. I left the laboratory, went to Temple University here in Philadelphia, got myself a bachelor's degree in environmental design and horticulture. And I took an internship, a year-long position with the Morris Arboretum in Philadelphia, which is part of the University of Pennsylvania. And I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. So as my internship was expiring, there was a vacancy on staff for horticulturist. And the Arboretum at that time was building a brand new Platinum LEED, LEED certified horticulture center. And atop the garages that we were building, we were having green roofs. So I literally have been there since the beginning to see those green roofs from construction to planting to maintenance.
Wow, and how long has that LEED certified building been there?
That was opened in the spring of 2010. So it's actually not a new building anymore. It's going on its 12th anniversary.
And when one visits the Morris Arboretum, that's on the side of, I guess, the campus, we could call it, that's not normally publicly accessible, correct?
That is correct. Unfortunately, the public does not get to enjoy my labors unless we're having a special event where Bloomfield Farm is opened. And due to our last year with COVID restrictions, we have had virtually no public events on the farm. So we are hopeful that that will change later this year.
Morris Arboretum, who was it named for? How did it come into an existence?
Well, the Morris Arboretum was originally a private estate of Quaker brothers, sister, John and Lydia Morris. Their father was the founder and owner of the I.P. Morris Iron Works in Philadelphia. So that's how the family came into their wealth. John was a graduate of Haverford College in engineering. So he studied, and his sister Lydia was, of course, just a lady of leisure. And neither of them married. So they decided to live together in a lovely mansion called Compton, which was on the top of the hill at the Morris Arboretum. Unfortunately, the mansion is no longer there. And they both lived there until their deaths. So in 1932, when Lydia passed, she deeded her estate to the University of Pennsylvania for it to become a teaching institution and for the university to use it for botanical development, science, education. And they were also hopeful that it would become an educational institution for people in the green industry.
Was that fulfilled? It sounds like that mission has really come into fruition.
I would say yes, their vision was really fulfilled. We do education. Again, we're kind of a truncated schedule now because of COVID, but we have a whole series of classes for professional development for arborists. For our lay public, for professional horticulturists, we're a co-sponsoring institution for such things up here as the Woody Plants Conference, which is held annually at Swarthmore College. And we have internship programs. So yes, we're very strong on education.
And you know what my mind correlates when I hear the word Morris Arboretum or the name is that winding hill when you come up the entrance of nice grassy kind of prairie-like um, landscape and those sheep cutouts that
Yeah.
are on the side of the hillside. And so that's just the beginning of a lot of the public art and sculpture that's placed around the garden. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yes, those slightly larger than life sheep are to evoke our formal pastoral heritage, and that's where we get our steel wool from. Uh, But there are other sculptures sprinkled throughout the garden. Most of them, I say, are contemporary, so that may not be to your liking, but they pop up here and there in the landscape. So it's a nice melange of horticulture and arts. And we do occasionally have exhibiting art features come in. So right now we do have a Patrick Doherty stick sculpture in sight, and that is now coming into its third year. So it's still in pretty good shape. You may have seen Patrick Doherty stick sculptures in other public gardens or arboreta. And they're meant to be just temporary installations. But this one we have is called Loop to Loop. If you went to the Morris Arboretum website, you would find pictures of it. And families really enjoy running through the different rooms in the stick sculpture.
Yeah, I love that it's so interactive and hands-on. And he just installed, and I would say this is a year and a half ago, at the U.S. Botanic Garden on the National Mall. But of course, because of COVID and other security restrictions, people haven't been able to access it for a while, but hopefully soon.
Yes, hopefully soon. It really is made to be an interactive, engaging piece. And our piece has been there long enough, and it's been made with willow. Some of the willow is actually sprouted at the top, so ours kind of has a green fringe growing from the top of the loops.
Yeah, I love that it's part of the artwork is the decay of it, the change of it, and in this case, it's actually growing and changing. So maybe it might become permanent in the Morris landscape.
It might, I'm not sure.
The other kind of similar piece of art that I love at Morris Arboretum is that kind of tree walk and the giant bird nest that you can sit in.
Yes, that's our feature called Out on a Limb. So it starts out at grade at street level, and then as you walk out onto that, the grade below you slowly drops away so that when you get out to the end, you're about 50 feet in the air and you're right up in the tree canopy. So it's really an interesting and safe way to kind of figure out what it's like to be up in the trees, especially today on a windy day. It would have been very entertaining to be up there. But there is also a mock oversized bird nest that kids can run around in and sit on the 3 blue eggs that are in there. And there's also a series of nettings put between some of the trees called the squirrel scramble, which in my observation, most adults are very reticent to set foot out there, but kids jump right in and bounce up and down. So it's a very fun, interactive feature in our landscape.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of heights myself, but I've been out in the bird's nest and felt totally comfortable up there. But I was going to say the squirrel is a scramble that you said.
Yeah, the netting up there is called the squirrel scramble.
I know. I think I tried 1 or 2 rungs of the rope or netting, and I was like, nah, I'll be back out here on safe land. So you must not have too much trepidation or fear of heights yourself to be out working on a green roof.
Well, I guess that's true. When I'm up there, I'm wearing a safety harness and I'm always clipped into a pin. So I guess I could fall off the roof, but I wouldn't have enough travel on my lanyard to actually hit the ground. And it's a very shallow slope. So, I don't feel threatened at any time, like I'm in danger of falling off of the roof.
And how do you access the green roof of that Morse Arboretum Center? So do you just is there a ladder on the side? Is it from the interior?
It's actually pretty nice. From the interior, there's what's called a ship ladder, which is a pretty steep runged ladder with handles, railings on each side. And then there's a hatch at the top. So I go up about 9 or 10 steps and then I emerge onto the roof.
when you're up there, how long do you usually stay up there? Is it just for a quick session of an hour a day, or do you spend all day sometimes up there?
Well, in the past, I have spent all day up there, especially when it was being established and we were planting plants and trying to water things in. Now we have, I'd say maybe we spend, with volunteer help, about 4 hours a week up there in season. And I'd love to spend longer, but I have other responsibilities, so I don't get to dally too much on my roof.
And when you're accessing the roof, now that it's been established, and we'll go back and talk about how you established it in a little bit, but are you looking for certain things? Are you looking for blank spots, weeds, maybe birds nesting up there?
Where I'm always looking for weeds, and I have no problem finding them. So even though the medium is supposed to be very nutrient poor, there are still many, many plants that would like to make a home up there. I have had nesting killdeer up there when the roof was first installed. That was fun to see. And there's sometimes in the morning when I walk by just at ground level past the roof, I'll see like birds peer over the side at me. So I know we have lots of bird visitors, even though there are none currently nesting there, and a fair amount of insect visitors also.
That's a great point. You don't think of a green roof as being, say, a pollinator or an insect haven. Uh, you think of it as being amongst the birds, but you can be joined by almost anything up there.
Pretty much, if it can fly, it can get up there, but if it has 4 feet, it does not up there. So I don't have the pressures of deer or squirrels or chipmunks or any of those other critters that could potentially wreak havoc with my plantings.
Okay, I'm going to have to include that in my deer proofing talk.
Yes.
Green wall or green roof. That's a great idea to be up high enough that they cannot reach. So let's talk a little bit about the construction of the green roof that you're on. So there's a lot of different ways of making green roofs, and this one you were lucky enough that it was designed and formed with a new building, correct?
Exactly. So it was engineered, the building was engineered in the beginning to take the weight of the green roof. So it wasn't like trying to retrofit an existing structure, which can be more difficult. So the roof that I'm speaking about today, the intensive roof, has about 7 to 8 inches depth of medium. And when that is fully saturated after a rainstorm, that goes between 45 to 50 pounds per square foot. So that's a heck of a lot of weight that roof has to hold up.
Wow.
And it's about 3,500 square feet that is vegetated. So that's an enormous weight to hold up. But if you were to see the inside of the structure, you would see the steel girders, and it was designed to hold that weight, plus the weight of people working up there, or tools, or snow load. Um, so there's no time at all when I'm up there does it feel like bouncy or any kind of vibration, or it feels very, very sturdy.
And when you mention snow load, so snow and ice, do you have to go out there and shovel that off, or do you just let it always naturally melt?
No, no, it just naturally melts.
Yeah, I would think that would be a maintenance issue that I would not want to face on a
I no,
rooftop.
I could not imagine trying to clear snow off of that.
So for the water weight, which is a huge concern on green roofs, do you have a cistern or other system that collects runoff stormwater from that?
Actually, we do. The water goes down through a couple layers and then slowly filters out through some scuppers. And then the scuppers direct water into, we have two large above ground cisterns that each hold about 14,000 gallons. And then if they overflow, we have an additional underground cistern in that same area close by that holds up to 50,000 gallons of water. So then with an electric pump that's in there, I can bring that water back up to water the landscape surrounding the green roofs or the green roof itself.
Do you find that you need to water up there that much?
I find I do not. If it's a really hot, droughty, dry period in the summer, and I would say if that was like 3 weeks without appreciable rain, then yes, there is an irrigation system that I can turn on, which is nothing more than a pop up residential lawn sprinkler system that was retrofitted up there. So when I need to, I turn that on for about 30 minutes. and the sprinkler heads oscillate back and forth to cover the entire roof. And then that's it. I turn it off.
And that brings us to your plant mix and maybe talking a little bit about the planting medium that you put it in. But first, let's talk about the membrane and what's underneath that green roof. So, even though it was a new building that was engineered for a green roof, I imagine there are several layers that separate that from the computers and books and offices and everything that are below that.
Yes, so there are a number of layers on the roof, and there's no one set formula. So that varies from contractor to contractor. It would vary based on your climate. I guess it varies on your architect. So the building itself, the garage, has a steel roof. But on top of that was put perhaps about half-inch thick plywood sheeting. And then on top of that was put a rubber membrane. And this rubber membrane was laid down in sheets, and the roofers had to seam seal where the sheets overlapped, because that is the waterproof barrier to keep water out of the building. And because this was a slanted roof, they were not able to do what they would typically do on a flat roof, in that once you put that waterproof membrane down, you would flood that and let water sit there for a day or two just to make sure you didn't have any perforations or leaks. So we did not have that option, and fortunately we have had no leaks. But then on top of that, there are some other layers. One of them is I call it a drainage board. So it's a multi-layered thing. It has a geotextile, which is kind of a densely woven fabric that lets water come through, but not plant roots. So that's on the top and the bottom. And then in the center of that, the layer is plastic that looks kind of like egg crate foams, those kind of cup shapes. And in the bottom of each one of those cups is a small perforation. So the drainage board is made to capture the water as it comes down through the medium. The water can sit in those little cups for a little bit, and then it can slowly, by gravity, percolate out down off of the roof. And above the drainage board would be another layer of geotextile membrane to make sure roots or fines from the soil doesn't get through. And then the growing medium itself. And that is not like typical garden soil. That is an engineered mix of different fines, sizes of gravel. There might be some expanded shale or clay in there. And in our area, what was local to us was mushroom compost. So spent mushroom compost from the houses out in Kennett Square was incorporated to give us about a 10%, at the most, 10% organic component to that roof medium.
Do you find that you have to fill in with new growing medium? Does that either blow away with the wind, or when you extract maybe some weeds, that you have to level it off every once in a while?
We have found that we don't have wind shear, which is nice, because now the roots have firmly permeated all the particles in the roof. So I don't have the problem of wind shear. But occasionally when we do weed, we try to shake off as much of the growing medium as we can. But I do once in a while refresh the medium. So I've done that a couple times in the past few years, but not extensively. And the medium doesn't seem to shift. Gravity does not make it slump towards the bottom of the roof either, because all the plant roots at this point keep everything in check.
That's a great point. Yeah, I would think that, the weight of it and where you have that even a slight 5-degree angle would have made some of that come down. So that's great that it's all staying in place with just plant roots. And so most of your plant selections that you're using on the roof, are they drought tolerant? Are they succulents? What families of plants are you using?
I have a pretty amazing variety up there. We've used, I believe, over 75 different plants. And part of the fun has been torturing plants up there to see what lives and what doesn't. So originally, our landscape architect spec'd that we were going to replicate a Pennsylvania shale barrens community, which is a great idea, except nobody in the nursery trade is growing those plants. So it was hard to implement that plan. So we decided, well, let's look at plants, native and non-native, that we think will take these hot, dry, droughty conditions in full sun and potential wind. So we came up with quite a list of things. I've had some spectacular failures, but all in all, I've had a lot of successes. And I can discuss those plants with you if you like.
Absolutely. I especially want to hear about those spectacular failures.
Oh, well, okay. Well, let's start with one of those. Well, we found out our green roof medium had a pH of about 8, which, if you know anything about the pH scale, that's pretty high number. Plants generally like to be like maybe 5.5, 6, 7, 7.5. Most plants are adaptable to those pH ranges, but 8 I thought was pretty high. So one of the things we tried up there was an Erica, which is in the like rhododendron and azalea family, which definitely wants acidic soils. So acidic soils will be in the lower range of the pH scale, below 7. Well, since we put them into a soil medium that was a pH of 8, they promptly checked out. So they were up there for a summer and they said goodbye. Another thing we tried, we know that there are cold hardy succulents like yuccas and agaves, especially things from northern Mexico that grow in the high mountains that can take freezing temperatures. So we decided to look at them for cold hardiness, and we did put them up there, especially agaves, I'm thinking. Agave Americana, some other agaves we put up there. They look great. They loved it in the summer. It was hot. It was dry. But since we have really cold, moist winters in Philadelphia, sometimes with rain, sometimes with snow, we found that the following spring, all the crowns had rotted out. So we lost to a plant every one.
That's too bad.
Yet we tried yuccas, and yuccas have like thinner, more fibrous leaves. And yuccas have done fine. Like yuccas have bloomed up there for me. It's pretty amazing. Some other things we have up there. We planted grasses, and I did not listen to Ed Snodgrass, who is the master of green roof plants in Maryland, and he said you should only plant about 10% of the grasses you think you'll need. So no, we went with wild abandon. We planted different things like panicums and pennisedums and schizocuriums. Well, we found that they were just all too happy and have happily seeded all over the roof. So I would say now that most of our maintenance is removing unwanted grasses. So in the last year, we've made a concerted effort to really shrink our number of grasses and the types of grasses up there.
So Ed's advice was spot on, you think?
It was. So if you're going to do a green roof, be very careful with grasses.
And what about flowering plants? You said that the yucca had flowered for you, but other native, perhaps perennials, maybe even annuals?
Yes, we haven't really done too much in annuals, but Aquilegia canadensis, our native columbine, loves it. Self seeds everywhere. Alliums, like Allium cernuum, the nodding onion, or Allium schoenoprasum. Again, like our edible, kitchen allium, loves it up there. If I don't deadhead them, they go to seed and they spread around with wild abandon, which is okay if you want to fill in space. Lots of different things. Dianthus, not necessarily native dianthus, but dianthus have been very happy up there with that silvery blue foliage. They can laugh off the sun, and they're blooming. I think I have plants that will probably be blooming next week. I saw buds up there today. Another really good one, a native Monarda bradburyiana. That is just fabulous. That laughs at the conditions up there. That's very happy. It started to self-seed around, and I highly encourage that. Insects really love that Monarda. And of course, we have native cacti, Opuntia. So both are eastern native Opuntia, Humifusa, and Phaeacantha. Sorry, these don't have common names, really. Both are happy up there. In fact, the landscape architect wanted me to sprinkle cacti all over the roof, and I declined because I have to tiptoe through those plants. So we planted our Opuntia only on the edge where we could manage them and not be stabbed every time we walk by.
Yeah, that is definitely a concern. And weeding around them with tongs and leather gloves on.
Yes. So that is still a challenge. So when I have to weed that, I put the leather gloves on. I have these like long 12-inch forceps, and I try to pick away in there. Of course, sedums do really well. Sedums and sempervivums. And I have a number of those different ones up there. Sedum acre, sedum album. They all do well. And if I have bare spots to fill in, I could just pinch off some of those sedum stems, stick them in the soil somewhere else, and they'll root. Some herbs really have done well. Rosemary ARP, loved it. Lavender, loves it. Thyme, loves it, as do the bees love thyme. So I've had many, many successes up there, and it's been a lot of fun. And of course, I didn't stop there. I also planted bulbs. So right now up there, I have Camassia blooming, which is a western Pacific Northwest native, but I'll take it. I'll call that native. And different crocus. I've put spring blooming crocus, fall blooming crocus up there, grape hyacinth. You might know that. And some of our cute little species tulips, none of which are native to North America. But they're some of the earliest blooms up there on the roof. And they're so short that you as a visitor would not notice them from the ground. But me, the gardener, I get to appreciate them.
Yeah, I would never have thought about using small bulbs up on a green roof or even a green wall, but that's a great point because you have such perfect drainage and it's the perfect planting situation for, as you said, many of the Mediterranean herbs, a lot of our succulent and cactuses, and then of course grasses that want pure great drainage.
Right. Anything that likes hot and dry and great drainage, very happy up there.
And you can't overwater, right?
That's true. Again, the drainage is really good. Even though the medium, it has kind of a contrary mission, like I would say. So the green roof medium itself has to be a little bit spongy. It has to hold some water, but it has to also, let water course through and get down into the drainage layers because you don't want to have a super saturated, extra heavy roof.
Yeah, because I will be the first one to admit I'm an overwaterer of things in pots and, and sometimes in the ground. So yeah, that will hold in water, but this is a perfect place to be planting for those of us who are admitted overwaterers. How about for plant choices uh, that you might use in a green wall as opposed to a green roof? So a green wall system, which is basically vertical up and down,
Right.
you could probably extend that plant family to even some of the tropicals because it's almost like a drip irrigation system.
Yeah, that is what I've seen. A lot of them do have a better water delivery system. So water goes to the top. From the back, you don't see it. And then, by gravity, it trickles down through your pans or bins or however it's arranged. So um, things that want more water would probably be happier there. I've seen setups where you can do herbs. You can do lettuce, crops in them, which could be fun for the homeowner. You have to have a portable green wall system and you can harvest things from it. But you're right, you could do some other tropicals and maybe, if you're not expecting it to be cold hardy, you can certainly do things. Anthuriums would be great in there. Different ferns, or if you're in a shady location, I'm thinking of the fabulous green wall that's indoor along with gardens. What they have in there, many, many ferns. But, also some of the other things we talked about here would be amenable to that. So again, like the alliums that grow great on my roof, they would be happy there. The rosemary, probably the thyme, and the thyme would probably cascade down the front of the planters, which would look nice. It would cover the mechanics of it.
So for the typical homeowner and home gardener, if they wanted to install a green roof or green wall, so let's start with green roof. What would be the first things you're maybe in an established home that they should look at?
Okay, well, I would say your house itself is probably not a candidate. You would have to bring in a structural engineer to assess your roof and how that would have to be reinforced to hold the weight. But maybe you have like a shallow, like what's called a shed roof or a porch roof, the smaller area that you might retrofit to hold a green roof, or maybe have an outdoor garden shed, or even like a dog house. Those could certainly be, smaller areas that would be amenable to green roofing.
Yeah, I've seen a really nice example of green roof on a doghouse.
That would be perfect, and keep your pet cooler in the summer.
And it's totally accessible and you don't have to risk the height, right?
Exactly, and you can enjoy it from ground level.
Mhm. But yeah, so it's not just the weight of the plants, the substrate, all those layers that we talked about, and the irrigation system maybe, but it's that water weight that we're really concerned about for your structural safety in a home.
Right, because when that's saturated, that's a heck of a lot of weight that your roof has to carry.
And for a green wall, I think your main concern is where you're attaching it to and what's behind it. Because in some cases, say water might leak out the back, and if it's, say, against a brick or a stone wall, that might not be a problem, but other surfaces that could be.
Right, that's true. So I would expect that you would probably have that anchored, but you would have a potential space of a couple inches between your green roof and whatever your structure is, so that you could avoid having moisture right up against the building. And typically, they have a pan at the bottom to catch water and recirculate, so you shouldn't have any problems with water seeping into your foundation
And that's for
for
vertical green
for a
walls.
vertical wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen some of those also like on casters that you can roll them around.
Yeah, I've seen systems where they're freestanding, where you can almost make it a division, say, between two neighbors in a row house
Yes. Mhm.
situation. Those would be great. Obviously, a little more water intensive, and I don't know quite how the pumping system would work to get the water to the top.
Right. So it has to have a pump somewhere. So if you can attach this to a dedicated, you have like an outdoor line for water. I assume that you would probably have to do that. And then, there's a pump somewhere in there that would recirculate water and get the water up to the top layer. And then by gravity, it'll trickle down into the pans or bags or whatever it has, the trays below.
And aside from the gorgeous green wall you noted at Longwood Gardens, are there others in the Mid-Atlantic area, green roof or green wall systems that you recommend that the public can go and look at?
Hmm. Well, I know if you're in Pittsburgh, the PNC Bank building has a fabulous vertical green wall that's a couple stories. I think they have their logo incorporated into that. Um, I'm thinking down in the Metro DC area, you have some, and I can't give you a name because I'm not familiar down there, but I know a lot of the federal buildings have green roofs.
Hmm.
I remember seeing some spectacular ones in Miami, Florida area, actually seeing one installed down there.
Wow, can you describe that one being installed?
That was, again, multi-story. That was probably 5 or 6 stories on a high-end residential condominium building, and they had all the metal framework was up, and the planting, it looked like pans were in there, and then the workers were up on these giant lift trucks, and they were actually planting the day I was there. So it's gonna be a really interesting, facade. Now, since it was Miami, they can plant, things that we can't because of our cold temperatures, but I imagine this was gonna be a big, lush green cascade by the time they were done.
And I can imagine some of that maintenance. You have to be up there on a cherry picker
Yes.
every year. Say what the thing that I find of maybe a maintenance issue on green walls that I don't think a lot of people think about is that those little drip emitters into each cell at each plant's root zone can get plugged up. Do you
Yes.
find that on your rooftop?
Now, I don't have emitters like that, but yes, I found that the overhead system that we have, which is made for residential lawns, those heads get clogged all the time. So there is periodic maintenance there.
I think you have been to Glenstone in Potomac, Maryland, correct?
Yes, I've been there.
So there's the
Mhm.
split rocker sculpture by Jeff Koons, and it's essentially a green roof on the top of its head
Yes.
and a green wall all the way around and then under its chin as well. So it's this giant sculpture of a rocking horse head type of split rocker, as per the name, that's planted up with annuals. So it's a seasonal green roof or green wall installation. So it's basically April through October ish, and that has a big plinth that it sits out on with a recirculating cistern underneath it. Can you describe that a little bit more, Louise?
Yes, as I recall, that was all planted in annuals, and there's a big, I guess it's a metal armature, and then into that they have stuffed, I think it's peat, and then within that they put the individual annual plants. So I don't know how many thousands of annuals that requires to do, but I'm glad I'm not the horticulturist there for that project.
I do know that it's a several days project to plant it up in the springtime. And then the rest of the year, that like October, November through March, say, you can still go and see the split rocker, but you're just seeing the green fabrication over the armature. So it's like a green landscape cloth, basically.
Right, but even that would be interesting to see without the plants. And I can't imagine, like you say, those emitter heads must get clogged. So I'm sure their horticulturists spend a fair amount of time troubleshooting because without water, those plants, I'm sure, would start to suffer, and then you'll have brown spots, and then you have to replace plants during the season. And
Mm-hmm.
um, talk about high maintenance.
Yeah, definitely high maintenance. And I know that the artist had prescribed a palette. There's definitely a eye where it's a juga, I believe, and some white flowers around it. So you do see
Yes.
the eye of the split rocker. And then the rest is kind of multicolored, different like zinnias, coleus, depending on what size and where it is in the wind. But there's a definite pattern. And that has to be placed on there. And I guess when a couple plants fail, that has to be repaired immediately because it is a public work of art that's being visited every day. And I know that they had said that the struggle really was that shadow under the chin. So if you can imagine a rocking horse head, and then that underneath the chin cannot be the same type of annual flowers you have everywhere else.
Right, because essentially they're going to be growing in the shade. So
Hmm.
you have to have a
Yeah.
different choice. And then I'm not sure, but I would assume that they probably have some wind stress on that.
Hmm.
Depending, I would think, the western side probably dries out faster. And with the sun on there in the summer, I'm guessing they may be replacing plants more frequently on the western side than the eastern side.
Hmm. Yeah, it's sitting up on the top of a hill there that's elevated, so you actually get a nice view of the countryside around it in Potomac, Maryland. But yeah, the exposure is much more, I think, than a normal green roof or green wall would be handling. So, any other, I was going to say artworks or green sculptures that you can think of?
I know in Atlanta Botanic Garden, they've had a whole series of what they called Mosaic Sculptures, which again were armatures planted up with a whole different panoply of live plants. And they still have, I believe, down there the Earth Goddess. She's planted in front of a big pool of water, so it's like her head and torso, and she has long hair that flows over her shoulder. And these are all planted in different, mostly annuals, I believe, down there. So she's really beautiful. And they've been in Toronto, I believe. And I think there was a traveling exhibition at one point, but I know there are some certain permanent
Hmm.
features at Atlanta Botanic Garden. So the Earth Goddess is there. They had a couple of fun shaggy dogs that were done with carex, a type of grass.
I was going to say they're almost like topiaries, but they're planted. So
Right.
you create some type of earthen or metal armature and then stuff it with peat or some type of growing medium and then plug the plants in. But yeah, that goddess is amazing. And every once in a while you see it make the rounds of social media, like
Yeah.
on Facebook, or there'll be the ones from the ones you mentioned from Toronto and also in China. So there'll be like a dragon that's planted up all in plants, and I think both Disney US properties have a few of those installations as well.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. And I know for the Atlanta one in December, they've had her lighted up at night with like kind of looks like bluish white LEDs. So it looks almost, chilly, even though we know it's Atlanta. It's not snowy.
Aside from being up on the rooftop and, and your other tasks at Morris, how do you spend your free time? Do you have a home garden, and what does it look like?
I do have a home garden, and my home garden is fairly small compared to what I garden at the Arboretum, but I am a zone denier and I love tropicals. So, I have some spring bloomers right now. I do have spring bulbs, but my garden really comes on late July into August when the cannas, the bananas, the dahlias, all those things really come on. I like to have a nice jungly effect. And in the very back of my property, I have what I call a Tiki Hut, which I built from repurposed materials. So that's covered seating area up there for two, and I can look out at my tropical paradise with my caladiums, my dahlias, a lot of the colocasias. I have the giant elephant ears that just go wild. When I sit there, I can't even see the front of my property or the street. It's amazing how well it grows in. And I do have a small water feature, so I have the sound of water, and I have frogs.
Nice. And I love that what you have at home is so different from what you have at your workplace.
Yes, well, I haven't figured out how to put a green roof on in my shed here, so I haven't done that.
So, when you're relaxing at your tiki hut and overseeing your home jungle, are you looking for other garden venues to speak at and write at? I know we're both members of Garden Communicators, GardenCom, and that you've partnered with one of our past guests on Garden DC, and that's Eva Monheim, who was on episode 12 talking about hedges and shrubs.
Yes, so you have met and talked to Eva. She and I have formed a company called Verdant Earth Educators, and we are trying to spread the good news about all things green. So we have done some in-person training, which has come to a temporary hiatus due to COVID now. But we are educating people in the commercial world and also homeowners as to different things to do correctly with plants, especially our focus with woody trees and shrubs, although we certainly do know annuals and perennials. But as Eva has written a wonderful book for homeowners on trees and shrubs, they really are the backbone of your landscape. So sometimes people are afraid to prune them or really don't know what to do. So I think her book is an excellent how-to manual, and we've been trying to reinforce through our live instruction um, how you can best make these plants assets in your home landscape.
So you'll come out to, say, HOA, a homeowners association, or to a municipality or a county and train those who are in charge of the landscapes to take care of them?
Yes, we have done trainings like that, and I've done some individual homeowner assessments too. And someone found me here locally. I'm not sure how. And said, "Oh, you're an arborist." I said, "Yes, I am." So I went over to a young couple, and they had just purchased their house, and we looked at their existing landscape and woody trees, and we made recommendations. And I guess it was last year in October, I went over there and I actually taught them how to prune and take care of their trees. They had some fruit trees that they wanted to see. Can they get them to fruit? So I showed them pruning techniques, told them what to expect this spring, and I'll be following up with them shortly.
Yeah, I think pruning is one of those skills that needs to be done in person. Like, you can do a lot on Zoom,
Yeah.
but it's so hard to teach somebody and to show them the cuts without doing it side by side in their garden.
Yes. So it was fun for me with this couple to actually show them, and I had them make the cuts to reinforce what they were learning, and explain why as we went along. So hopefully that has made them confident pruners.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts or advice for maybe the home gardener who wants to do a mini green roof or green wall?
Well, I would say start small. Like I said, dog house. Maybe you have a small out structure. Do you have maybe like a lean-to where you keep your trash or refuse cans? Those are all kind of good. Would be good small starting um, projects. I would say you just need to be wary of the pitch on your roof because if you have a fairly, I don't know, maybe more than 12 or 15 degrees, you would probably have to put horizontal strips called battens in because you don't want your plants or your medium to slip down towards the lower edge. So you can accommodate that way. But a lot of the plants are pretty amenable, as I said, and you can get things like you can get columbines or, alliums. You could have herbs on a roof. You could even do some small shrubs. I have junipers that do really well up on my roof. Um, so I think it could be a fun experiment. And if it's low enough, you're not going to plant on top of a building. You'll be able to monitor and see when it needs water, and you can just play the hose on it when you need to.
And that does bring up sourcing. So for most of the plants on your green roof at the Morris Arboretum, were they started as plugs from seed or a little bit larger plants?
I had a whole combination. Some things we got as plugs for economy because if you wanted to plant 50 or 60 of something, plugs are certainly cheaper than gallons or 2 gallons. But a lot of the shrubs that we used were generally gallon sized. And over the years, I've had the propagator at the Arboretum help me propagate some things, namely penstemons from seed that we've tried up there. But like you get stuff like in a 3-inch pot at your retail garden center. That's a fine size for you to incorporate into a green roof planting.
Terrific. And I can imagine many of the rock garden type of plants would be at home there as well.
Absolutely fabulous. I mean, that's how I ended up joining my local rock garden society, because I thought, hey, those people are growing plants at like full sun, dry conditions. It sounds just like my roof. So I'm going to go talk to those people and have them recommend plants to me. And they welcomed me with open arms and gave me seeds and plants and suggestions. And it's been a happy affair since.
Nice. All right. So, how can listeners contact you if they want your services from the Verdant Earth Company or consulting?
They can find me or my partner Eva at verdanteartheducators.com. And also, if you want to contact me at the university, you can use my local email there, which is locla@upenn, which is letters UPENN.edu.
Terrific. Thanks, Louise.
You're welcome. It was a fun talk, Kathy.
Bleeding Hearts Plant Profile. Bleeding Hearts, Lamprocapnus spectabilis, formerly Dicentra spectabilis, look so enchanting in the garden with their neat rows of hanging hearts in mid-spring. This old-fashioned favorite is also known as lyre flower, lady's locket, and lady in the bath. This woodland perennial likes to be planted in some shade with a bit of morning sun. It prefers soil that is moist but well-draining, with lots of composted leaf mold added in for amendment. It is hardy from USDA zones 2 through 8. This plant goes dormant in the heat and humidity of summer in our mid-Atlantic region, so place them among ferns and hosta, which will fill in as the bleeding hearts die back. It can reach a height of 2 to 3 feet and forms loose, bushy clumps. It has a thick, fleshy root that can be divided and replanted in late winter, just before the spring growth starts. It can also self-seed, unless it is a sterile variety. The common garden variety has blooms of rosy pink, but the white version is just as lovely. Newer cultivars like Ruby Gold and King of Hearts can have different colored flowers and foliage. Some of these are quite spectacular. There is also a native fringed bleeding heart, Dicentra eximia. It is a bit more demure than the cultivated varieties, but just as enchanting. Bleeding hearts, you can grow that. What's new in my garden this week? Well, the lilacs are perfuming up the block, and the other spring blooming shrubs are bursting into bloom. Those include the Weigela, Calycanthus, and Deutzia. And of course, I can't forget azaleas. And if you don't have azaleas in your own home garden, or even if you do and just want to immerse yourself in all that azalea glory that can be had in the DC area in springtime. We're updating our list of top azalea viewing sites on the Washington Gardener blog, so look for that post in the next couple days, and I highly recommend a visit to many of these sites in the next week or so because azaleas are at peak. That includes Brighton Dam in Brookville, Maryland, Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland, Macrylis Garden in Bethesda, Maryland. In DC, we can't forget the incredible azalea collection at the U.S. National Arboretum. There's also beautiful azaleas to be seen at Hillwood and Tudor Place. In Northern Virginia, Green Spring Gardens and Meadowlark Botanic Gardens also offer wonderful azalea displays. Happy gardening and happy garden touring. Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to anchor.fm/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com. Thank you. You can find Washington Gardener online at WashingtonGardener.com, on Twitter at WDC Gardener, on Instagram at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook.com at Washington Gardener Magazine.